In a traditional family, a beautiful young woman dreamed of true love built on respect and trust. A millionaire crossed her path, and she thought she had finally found what she always wanted. But she soon discovered that what seemed like love was actually a prison, filled with dark secrets. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Emily Matthews had always been the kind of woman who believed in fairy tales. Growing up in the quiet suburbs of Burlington, Vermont, she had been raised on her mother's stories of true love and happily ever afters. Her parents, Thomas and Marie Matthews, embodied the traditional American family, married for 35 years with a love story that began in high school and blossomed into a lifetime of unwavering commitment. "When you find the right person, Emily," her father would say during their Sunday dinners, "you'll know it in your soul. Love isn't just about butterflies in your stomach, it's about building something that lasts." Emily had internalized these lessons, carrying them like precious stones in her pocket as she navigated her way through college at the University of Vermont, and later, when she moved to Boston to pursue her career in publishing. At 27, she had dated a few men, but none had matched the ideal she held so dear. The kind of love her parents shared, built on mutual respect, understanding, and unconditional support. The autumn air carried a hint of winter as Emily hurried up the steps of Hammond Publishing House, clutching her leather portfolio to her chest. As a junior editor, she had finally earned the opportunity to pitch her own project, a series of biographies featuring influential women who had shaped American history. It was her chance to prove herself in the competitive world of publishing, to show that her ideas were worth investing in. "You've got this," she whispered to herself as she pushed through the revolving doors and entered the sleek, modern lobby. The meeting went better than she could have hoped. The senior editors had nodded approvingly as she laid out her vision, and by the time she gathered her materials, she had been given the green light to begin reaching out to potential authors. Elated, Emily decided to treat herself to lunch at the upscale restaurant across the street, a rare indulgence on her modest salary. The Sapphire Room was everything its name suggested, an elegant space bathed in shades of blue, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. As Emily was led to a small table by the window, she couldn't help but feel out of place among the tailored suits and designer dresses that filled the restaurant. She had just ordered a glass of wine when she noticed him. Seated at a corner table, surrounded by men in expensive suits, was Alexander Blackwood, the Alexander Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast. His face was a familiar one, having graced the covers of business magazines and financial newspapers. At 35, he had already amassed a fortune that most people couldn't achieve in several lifetimes. Emily tried not to stare, but there was something magnetic about his presence. It wasn't just his physical appearance, though he was undeniably handsome with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, but the way he commanded attention without seeming to try. He spoke, and the men around him leaned in, as if afraid to miss a single word. When their eyes met across the room, Emily felt a jolt of electricity shoot through her body. He held her gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, before turning back to his companions. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood would like to send you a glass of champagne, if that's all right with you." Emily looked up at the waiter in surprise. "I'm sorry." "Mr. Blackwood," the waiter repeated, nodding discreetly toward the corner table. "He asked me to bring you our finest champagne." Flustered, Emily glanced back at Alexander, who raised his glass in a subtle toast. That's very kind of him, but I couldn't possibly accept." "He insisted," the waiter said with a smile. "And between you and me, Mr. Blackwood isn't used to hearing no." Before Emily could protest further, a flute of golden champagne appeared before her. She took a small sip, the bubbles dancing on her tongue, and found herself locking eyes with Alexander once more. This time he stood up, excused himself from his table, and began walking toward her. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," he said, his voice deep and smooth as he reached her table, "but I couldn't help noticing you celebrating. Good news?" Emily hesitated, caught off guard by his forwardness. "Yes, actually. A project of mine was approved today," "Congratulations," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Against her better judgment, Emily nodded. There was something about his confidence that both intimidated and intrigued her. "Alexander Blackwood," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I know who you are," Emily replied, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm, his skin warm against hers. "I'm Emily Matthews." "Emily," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "What kind of project are you celebrating, Emily?" She found herself telling him about her series of biographies, surprised by his apparent interest as he asked thoughtful questions about her vision and the women she planned to feature. What she had expected to be a brief, awkward exchange turned into a conversation that flowed with surprising ease. "Women who changed history despite the odds stacked against them," Alexander mused, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Fascinating. You know, I admire ambition, Emily. It's rare to find someone so passionate about their work." "Says the man who built an empire before the age of 30, Emily replied with a small smile. Alexander laughed, a rich sound that sent a curious warmth through her chest. "Touché. But my ambition was inherited. My father made it clear from an early age that anything less than extraordinary was unacceptable. The Blackwood name comes with expectations." For a moment, something vulnerable flashed in his eyes, so quickly that Emily wondered if she had imagined it. But before she could respond, his expression shifted back to one of confident charm. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said, not a question but a statement, as if the outcome was already decided. Emily blinked, taken aback by the sudden invitation. We've just met. And yet I feel like I've known you much longer," Alexander replied smoothly. "Life is too short for unnecessary formalities, Emily. When I see something I want, I don't waste time." The bluntness of his statement should have put her off, but instead, she felt a thrill run through her. "And you want me?" His eyes darkened, holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I want to get to know you better. Is that such a terrible thing?" Emily knew the sensible answer was to decline. Alexander Blackwood was clearly out of her league, a man accustomed to getting whatever he desired. She was not naive enough to believe that someone like him would be interested in anything serious with someone like her. And yet, "Okay," she heard herself say, surprising them both. "Dinner." Alexander's smile was triumphant, as if he had just closed an important business deal. "Perfect. I'll send a car for you at 7. Before she could tell him that wasn't necessary, he had pulled out a sleek business card and a pen, sliding them across the table. "Your address?" As Emily wrote down her information, a voice in the back of her mind, one that sounded suspiciously like her mother's, warned her to be careful. Men like Alexander Blackwood didn't pursue women like her without an agenda. But as he took back the card, his fingers brushing against hers with deliberate slowness, Emily found herself unable to listen to that voice of reason. "Until tonight, Emily Matthews," he said, standing up and dropping several large bills on the table to cover both their meals, despite her protests. "Wear something nice, I want to show you off." With that, he returned to his table, leaving Emily to wonder what exactly she had just agreed to. As she watched him resume his meeting, commanding the attention of everyone around him, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than a simple dinner date. Later that afternoon, as Emily stood in front of her closet in her modest apartment, trying to decide what something nice meant to a billionaire, her phone rang. It was her mother, calling for their weekly chat. "How are you, sweetheart?" Marie Matthews asked warmly. "Did your big pitch go well?" "It did," Emily replied, leaving out the part about meeting one of the most powerful men in Boston immediately afterward. "They loved the idea. I'm starting work on it right away." "That's wonderful. Your father and I are so proud of you, honey. You know, this reminds me of when I first started teaching, taking that leap, believing in your ideas. It's the Matthews spirit." Emily smiled, feeling a pang of guilt for what she was keeping from her mother. Her parents had always emphasized the importance of honesty and open communication, especially when it came to relationships. But how could she explain Alexander Blackwood to them? a man who represented everything they had cautioned her against: wealth without substance, charm without depth, desire without love. Thanks, Mom. I have to go, actually. I have plans tonight. Plans? With anyone special? Her mother's hopeful tone made the guilt twist deeper. Just a work thing, Emily lied, hating how easily the deception came. I'll call you this weekend, okay? After hanging up, Emily stared at her reflection in the mirror, wondering if the woman looking back at her, excited and nervous about a date with a virtual stranger, was still the same Emily Matthews who had grown up believing in true love and fairy tales. At precisely 7 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver, a stoic man in a sharp uniform, opened the door for her. "Miss Matthews, Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you." As the car glided through the streets of Boston, Emily gazed out at the city lights, a mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling in her stomach. She was heading into unknown territory, toward a man who seemed to exist in a different world entirely from her own. The car pulled up to the Pinnacle, Boston's most exclusive restaurant, situated at the top floor of a glass skyscraper that pierced the night sky like a crystal spear. As Emily stepped into the elevator, she couldn't help but feel that she was ascending into a realm where different rules applied, rules that Alexander Blackwood had mastered long ago. When the doors opened, he was there waiting for her, his tall figure silhouetted against the panoramic view of the city behind him. His eyes traveled over her deep blue dress with unmistakable appreciation. "You look stunning," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. The gesture, both old-fashioned and intimate, sent a shiver down her spine. "Thank you," Emily replied, suddenly aware of how loud her heart was beating. "This place is incredible." Alexander smiled, a predator's smile that held promises and warnings in equal measure. "Wait until you see the view from our private dining room. I've arranged something special for you tonight, Emily Matthews." As he led her through the restaurant, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back, Emily felt every eye in the room turn to watch them. In that moment, she realized that by accepting his invitation, she had stepped into Alexander's world, a world of power, privilege, and control. What she didn't know was how difficult it would be to find her way back out. The private dining room at the Pinnacle was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Boston's glittering skyline, while a single table adorned with candles and white roses stood at the center of the room. A string quartet played softly in the corner, as if their sole purpose was to provide a soundtrack for this surreal evening. "Do you always go to such extravagant lengths for a first date?" Emily asked, attempting to mask her awe with humor as Alexander pulled out her chair. His lips curved into an amused smile. "I don't date, Emily, I select." The statement hung in the air between them, its implications making Emily's pulse quicken. There was something both unsettling and thrilling about his candor, about the way he seemed to disregard conventional social norms. "And what makes someone worthy of being selected?" she asked, meeting his gaze directly. Alexander studied her for a moment, his blue eyes calculating. "Uniqueness," he replied finally. "In a world full of people desperate to impress me, you were refreshingly unimpressed. It's a rare quality." The evening proceeded like a carefully choreographed dance. Alexander ordered for them both, a 7-course meal paired with wines that probably cost more than Emily's monthly rent. He spoke of his business ventures with the casual confidence of a man accustomed to success, yet he listened with unexpected attentiveness when Emily discussed her passion for literature and her dreams for her career. "You're different from most people in my circle," he observed as dessert was served. "You speak of work as if it's a calling, not just a means to wealth or status." Emily took a sip of her wine, feeling its warmth spread through her body. "Isn't that what work should be? Something that fulfills you beyond material rewards?" Alexander's expression darkened slightly. "My father would have called that naive. In the Blackwood household, success was measured by one metric only: power. How much you had, how much more you could get. That sounds lonely," Emily said softly. For a brief moment, Alexander's carefully maintained facade seemed to falter. It was, he admitted, then quickly recovered his composure. But it made me who I am today. I'd say the ends justified the means. As the evening drew to a close, Emily found herself torn. There was undeniable chemistry between them, a magnetic pull that made her heart race whenever their hands brushed or their eyes met. Yet something about Alexander unsettled her. Behind his charm and sophistication lurked an intensity that bordered on obsession, a need for control that manifested in every gesture and decision. "I'll drive you home," he announced as they left. The restaurant, leading her not to the car that had picked her up, but to a sleek silver Aston Martin parked in a reserved spot. "You don't have to," Emily began, but Alexander silenced her with a look. "I want to," he said simply, opening the passenger door for her. "Besides, I never leave anything to chance, especially not something as important as ensuring you get home safely." The drive to her apartment was quiet, the tension between them building with each passing minute. When they arrived, Alexander insisted on walking her to her door. "I had a wonderful time. Tonight," Emily said as they reached her apartment, fumbling slightly with her keys. Alexander moved closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "Did you?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. "Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the directness of his question. Yes, I did. But you're not sure about me," he finished for her, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "You're wondering if I'm too controlling, too intense, if getting involved with me would mean losing a part of yourself." His perceptiveness was unnerving. "Something like that," Emily admitted. Alexander reached out, his fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The casual intimacy of the gesture sent shivers down her spine. "Smart girl," he murmured. "You should be cautious. I'm not an easy man to be with, Emily. I demand a lot. But I can also give you everything you've ever wanted." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her, his lips claiming hers, with a possessiveness that left her breathless. The kiss was not gentle or questioning. It was a statement of intent, a preview of what surrendering to Alexander Blackwood would mean. When he pulled away, Emily's heart was pounding so loudly, she was certain he could hear it. "Good night, Emily," he said, his voice husky. "I'll call you tomorrow." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily staring after him, her fingers pressed to her lips, wondering what she had just set in motion. True to his word, Alexander called the next day and the day after that. Within a week, their relationship, if it could be called that, had fallen into a pattern. Expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants, private concerts, helicopter rides to his beach house in the Hamptons. Alexander spared no expense to impress her, to surround her with luxury and privilege. But it was during their private moments that Emily began to glimpse the man behind the powerful facade. Like the night they spent at his penthouse, when she found him standing at the window, staring out at the city below, with an expression of such profound loneliness that it made her heart ache. "My father died when I was 17, he told her. That night, his back still turned to her. Heart attack in the middle of a board meeting. His last words to me that morning were a reminder not to disappoint him by showing weakness. Even in death, he managed to control me." Emily had approached him then, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. "You're not him, Alexander." He had turned to her, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "Aren't I? Everything I touch, I control. It's how I survive." The night that followed was one of tender revelations and passionate discoveries. For the first time, Emily felt as though she was seeing the real Alexander, vulnerable, damaged, but capable of profound connection. It made her believe that perhaps she could be the one to reach the part of him that had been locked away for so long. That illusion shattered on a rainy Sunday afternoon, 3 months into their relationship. They were at Alexander's penthouse. Emily curled up on the sofa with a book, while he worked on his laptop nearby. The domestic tranquility of the scene had lulled Emily into a false sense of security. "I have to go to San Francisco next week," Alexander announced suddenly. A potential acquisition that needs my personal attention. I want you to come with me. Emily looked up from her book. I can't just leave, Alexander. I have work, responsibilities. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I've already spoken to your boss. He's given you the week off. You what? Emily sat up straight, setting her book aside. You had no right to do that. I have every right, Alexander replied calmly. You're mine now, Emily. Your time belongs to me. The possessiveness in his voice sent a chill through her. I'm not yours. I'm my own person, Alexander. He closed his laptop with deliberate slowness, his eyes never leaving hers. Are you? Then why do you wear the jewelry I buy you? Live in the apartment I pay for. Drive the car I gave you. Emily stared at him in shock. Over the past months, she had gradually accepted his lavish gifts, the designer clothes, the luxury apartment in Beacon Hill that he had insisted she move into for security reasons, the car that came with a full-time driver. Each one had seemed like a generous gesture, a sign of his affection. Now she saw them for what they truly were, golden handcuffs. I never asked for any of those things, she said quietly. Alexander moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. No, you didn't. That's what makes you special, Emily. You don't want my money, but I want to give it to you anyway. Is that so wrong? His tone had softened, but the underlying message remained clear. He expected compliance, in return for his generosity. I need to maintain my independence, Emily insisted. My career is important to me. Alexander's grip on her hand tightened slightly. And it's important to me that you're happy. But surely you can see that your little editing job is just that. Little. What I'm offering you is so much more. The condescension in his voice stung. My job matters to me. The women I'm writing about matter. Of course they do, he said soothingly, though his eyes remained cold. But you need to understand something, Emily. When you're with me, you have to play by my rules. There's no room for negotiation. Emily pulled her hand away from his. That's not a relationship, Alexander. That's ownership. His expression darkened. Don't push me, Emily. You have no idea what I'm capable of when I'm crossed. The threat, though veiled, hung heavy in the air between them. For the first time, Emily felt a genuine flicker of fear, not just of Alexander's anger, but of what she had allowed herself to become, a woman so enamored with a man's attention that she had willingly walked into his trap. I think I should go, Emily said, rising from the sofa. Alexander stood as well, his tall frame blocking her path. Go where? Back to your tiny apartment? Your mediocre job? Your ordinary life? His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made his words more cutting. You can't tell me you don't love the life I've given you, Emily. The worst part was that there was truth in what he said. She had grown accustomed to the luxury, the ease, the doors that opened simply because she was on Alexander Blackwood's arm. It had become intoxicating, not just the material comforts but the sense of power and privilege that came with being his chosen companion. I need time to think, she said finally, avoiding his gaze. Alexander reached out, tilting her chin up with his finger, forcing her to look at him. Time is something I can give you, but remember, Emily, no one will ever love you the way I do. No one will ever take care of you like I can. His words echoed in her mind as she left the penthouse, taking the private elevator down to the lobby, where his driver, waited to take her wherever she wished to go. Where to, Miss Matthews? The driver asked as he held the car door open for her. Emily hesitated, realizing with a sinking feeling that she no longer knew where she belonged. Her old apartment had been subleased, her modest furnishings put into storage. The life she had, built for herself before Alexander seemed distant now, like a story she had read about someone else. Just drive, she said finally, sinking back into the leather seat as rain streaked down the windows, blurring the city beyond. The car moved through the wet streets of Boston, and Emily found herself thinking of her parents, of the loving relationship they had built over decades. Her father had never dictated her mother's choices, never sought to control her life. Their love was a partnership of equals, not a power dynamic. Yet even as she recognized the toxicity of what Alexander offered, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. It wasn't just his wealth or power. It was the glimpses of vulnerability she had seen, the moments when his armor slipped and she caught sight of the wounded boy beneath the commanding man. Could she be the one to heal him? To teach him that love wasn't about possession but about mutual respect and support? Or was she simply making excuses for behavior that, deep down, she knew was unacceptable? The car pulled up at a red light, and Emily noticed a woman on the sidewalk, huddled, under an umbrella, laughing with a man who held her close against the rain. They looked happy, uncomplicated. When was the last time she had felt that way with Alexander? Her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from him, of course. It always was. "I've booked the San Francisco trip. We leave Friday at 9 a.m., car. We'll pick you up at 7. Don't make me come get you myself." No apology, no acknowledgement of her feelings or concerns. Just another command, another expectation of obedience. Emily stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. She had a choice to make, not just about a trip to San Francisco, but about the kind of woman she wanted to be, the kind of life she wanted to lead. As the car continued its aimless journey through the rainy city, Emily found herself at a crossroads. She could return to Alexander, accepting his terms and the golden cage he had built for her, or she could find the strength to walk away, to reclaim the independent spirit that had attracted him in the first place. The decision she made would shape not just her relationship with Alexander Blackwood, but her relationship with herself, a truth that became increasingly clear as the rain continued to fall, washing away the illusions she had so carefully constructed. Emily spent the night at a hotel, needing space to clear her head away from both her luxury apartment and Alexander's overwhelming presence. By morning, she had made her decision. She would go to San Francisco with him, not out of submission, but as an opportunity to understand the man who had swept into her life like a hurricane, dismantling everything she thought she knew about love and herself. When Friday came, she was waiting when the sleek black car pulled up to her apartment building. Alexander sat in the back seat, his focus on his phone, barely acknowledging her as she slid in beside him. "I'm glad you made the right choice," he said without looking up, his tone casual, as if their heated exchange had never happened. Emily fastened her seatbelt, keeping her voice steady. "I haven't made any choices yet, Alexander. I'm just giving us both a chance to figure out what we really want from each other." That got his attention. His eyes snapped to hers, surprise and something like respect flickering across his face. "Fair enough," he said after a moment. San Francisco is beautiful this time of year. Perhaps a change of scenery will provide clarity. The private jet waiting for them at the airport was yet another reminder of the world Alexander inhabited, a world of limitless privilege where desires became reality with a single command. As they soared above the clouds, Emily found herself watching him work, observing the intensity with which he approached every task. It was the same intensity he brought to their relationship, all-consuming, demanding, brooking no compromise. "You're staring," Alexander noted without looking up from his documents. "I'm trying to understand you," Emily replied honestly. He set aside his work then, turning to face her fully. "What is there to understand? I'm a simple man, Emily. I see what I want and I take it." "Is that how you see me, as something to be taken?" His lips curved into a slight smile. "I see you as something to be cherished, protected, elevated." "But not as an equal," Emily challenged. Alexander's expression shifted, a shadow passing over his features. "Equality is a myth, Emily. In every relationship, there's a balance of power. I simply don't pretend otherwise." Before she could respond, his phone rang. The conversation that followed was brief, but clearly tense, with Alexander's voice taking on an edge she had rarely heard before. "Change of plans," he announced after hanging up. "We need to stop in New York first. There's a situation that requires my immediate attention." Emily knew better than to ask for details. In the months they had been together, she had learned that Alexander's business dealings were a subject he kept closely guarded. While he spoke freely about his public ventures, the tech companies, the real estate developments, the charitable foundations, there were aspects of Blackwood Enterprises that remained shrouded in secrecy. They landed at a private airfield, outside New York City, where another car was waiting. Alexander's mood had darkened considerably, his jaw set in a hard line as he instructed the driver to take them to an address in Lower Manhattan. "I won't be long," he told Emily, as the car pulled up to a nondescript building. "Wait here." She watched as he disappeared inside, curiosity mixing with a growing sense of unease. 20 minutes stretched into an hour, and Emily found herself becoming increasingly restless. Against her better judgment, she decided to follow. The building's lobby was empty, save for a security guard who barely glanced at her as she walked confidently toward the elevators, as if she belonged there. On impulse, she pressed the button for the top floor, guessing that Alexander would naturally gravitate to the highest position available. The elevator opened directly into a sleek, minimalist office space. Voices drifted from behind a closed door at the end of a long hallway, one of them unmistakably Alexander's, raised in anger. "This is unacceptable, Senator. We had an agreement. The regulatory committee was supposed to block the investigation." A second voice, older and with a slight southern drawl, responded, "You can't just snap your fingers and make federal inquiries disappear, Blackwood. Even I have limits to my influence." "I don't pay you for limits, Harrison. I pay you for results. If the SEC gets access to those offshore accounts, it won't just be my problem. It'll be yours too. Or have you forgotten where your campaign financing came from last election?" Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. What was Alexander involved in? And who was this senator he was apparently threatening? "Are you threatening me, son?" the older voice growled. "I'm reminding you of our mutual interests," Alexander replied coolly. "Now, I suggest you make some calls and ensure this investigation gets redirected. I don't care how you do it, just get it done." Footsteps approached the door and Emily quickly retreated, slipping into an empty conference room just as the office door opened. Through the crack in the door, she watched as Alexander shook hands with an older man, whose face she recognized from news coverage, Senator James Harrison, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. "You'll have what you need by Monday," the senator said grimly. "But after this, we're even. I don't want to hear from you again." Alexander's laugh held no humor. "That's not how this works, and you know it. We'll be in touch, Senator." After the older man departed, Alexander made several phone calls, his voice too low for Emily to discern the content. She remained hidden, her mind racing with the implications of what she had overheard. Alexander wasn't just a successful businessman, he was involved in something that appeared to skirt the edges of legality, possibly corruption at the highest levels. When she was certain Alexander had left the floor, Emily slipped out of the conference room and hurried back to the car, arriving just minutes before he emerged from the building. "Sorry for the delay," he said as he slid in beside her, his demeanor once again composed and controlled. "A minor business issue that required personal attention." Emily forced a smile, her thoughts in turmoil. "No problem. Is everything okay now?" Alexander studied her for a moment, as if sensing something amiss. "It will be," he said finally. "Now, shall we continue to San Francisco? I have a surprise for you there." As the car headed back to the airfield, Emily struggled to reconcile the man beside her, the man who had pursued her with such intensity, who had shown her glimpses of vulnerability and tenderness, with the one she had just witnessed. A man who seemed to have influential politicians in his pocket and spoke casually of offshore accounts and thwarting federal investigations. The San Francisco trip proceeded as Alexander had planned. They stayed in a magnificent suite at the Fairmont, with panoramic views of the city and the bay beyond. He took her to Michelin-starred restaurants, arranged private tours of exclusive art collections, and showered her with attention that felt both intoxicating and suffocating. But beneath the surface of their luxurious getaway, tensions simmered. Alexander was distracted, spending hours on his phone or locked away in impromptu meetings. Emily, meanwhile, couldn't shake what she had overheard in New York. She began to notice things she had previously overlooked, the way certain names would cause Alexander to tense, the coded language he used in some of his business calls, the flash of something cold and calculating in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. On their third night in San Francisco, at a gala fundraiser for a children's hospital that Blackwood Enterprises heavily supported, Emily found herself standing alone by the bar while Alexander worked the room. She was sipping champagne when a woman approached her, striking in her mid-40s with silver-streaked dark hair and knowing eyes. "So you're Alexander's latest," the woman said without preamble, signaling the bartender for a drink. Emily bristled at the characterization. "I'm Emily Matthews, and you are?" "Sophia Reynolds. I used to be Alexander's business partner, among other things." She accepted her martini with a nod of thanks. "Before he decided I knew too much." Emily's interest was piqued despite her wariness. "What do you mean?" Sophia took a long sip of her drink, her eyes fixed on Alexander across the room. "Has he taken you to his lake house in Vermont yet? The one with the boathouse that's always locked? Or shown you the records of his family's charitable foundation in the Cayman Islands?" "I don't know what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything, honey." "I'm warning you." Sophia turned to face her fully now. "Alexander Blackwood isn't just a successful businessman with control issues. He's dangerous. There are women before you who learned that the hard way." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. What happened to these women? Sophia's gaze darted around the room, as if ensuring they weren't being observed. "They vanished," she said quietly. "Not literally, of course. But they were neutralized. One suddenly moved to Europe with a generous parting gift and an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Another found herself blacklisted from every financial institution in the country after she threatened to go public about certain irregularities she'd discovered. Alexander doesn't tolerate threats to his empire." "Why? Are you telling me this?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself a decade ago," Sophia replied. "Smart, idealistic, convinced you can change him." She finished her martini in one smooth swallow. "You can't. Men like Alexander don't change, they consume, and when they're done, they discard." Before Emily could respond, she felt a warm hand on the small of her back. Alexander had materialized beside her, his smile pleasant but his eyes cold as they flicked. Between her and Sophia. "Sophia," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were on the guest list." "I'm full of surprises, Alexander. You of all people should remember that." Sophia's smile was equally false, but there was genuine fear beneath her bravado. Alexander's grip on Emily's waist tightened imperceptibly. "Emily and I were just leaving, actually. Early morning tomorrow." "Of course," Sophia nodded, then turned to Emily. "It was lovely meeting you, Emily. Do take care of yourself." As Alexander led her away, Emily could feel the tension radiating from his body. "What did she want?" he asked once they were in the car heading back to their hotel. Emily hesitated, caught between her mounting suspicions and the desire to not provoke the side of Alexander she was beginning to fear. "Nothing. Really, just introducing herself as an old colleague of yours." His jaw clenched. "Sophia Reynolds is a vindictive woman with personal vendettas and a drinking problem. Whatever she told you was almost certainly a lie." "She seemed perfectly sober to me," Emily observed quietly. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "You need to be careful about who you trust, Emily. Not everyone has your best interests at heart the way I do." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on her. As they rode in silence back to the hotel, Emily found herself wondering who the real Alexander Blackwood was, the passionate lover who held her through the night, or the ruthless businessman who threatened senators and inspired fear in strong women like Sophia Reynolds. Later that night, as Alexander slept beside her, Emily slipped out of bed and retrieved his tablet from his briefcase. She had seen him input his password numerous times, his birth date followed by his mother's initials, a surprisingly sentimental choice for a man who prided himself on his detachment. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the device and began to search. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Buried in encrypted folders were documents detailing what appeared to be systematic bribery of government officials, complex money laundering operations through a web of shell companies, and evidence of market manipulation that would destroy Alexander if it ever came to light. But most disturbing was a folder simply labeled contingencies. Inside were detailed files on various individuals who posed potential threats to Alexander's empire, including comprehensive dossiers on several women who had been close to him. Women who had, according to the clinically worded reports, been neutralized as risks through various means of coercion, blackmail, and financial destruction. There was even a preliminary file on Emily herself, begun the day after they met. It included background checks on her family, detailed analyses of her financial situation, psychological assessments based on her social media activity, and notes on potential leverage points that could be exploited if necessary. Emily felt physically ill as she carefully replaced the tablet and returned to bed, her mind reeling. The man sleeping peacefully beside her wasn't just controlling. He was methodical in his manipulation, calculating in his affections. Everything about their relationship had been carefully orchestrated, from their seemingly chance meeting, which, according to the file, had been deliberately arranged after weeks of surveillance, to the gradual isolation from her former life. As dawn broke over San Francisco, Emily made a decision. She would pretend that nothing had changed, that she remained the captivated, if occasionally rebellious, girlfriend. Meanwhile, she would gather what evidence she could of Alexander's illegal activities. If, when, she broke free of him, she needed insurance, something to ensure that she wouldn't become just another name in his contingencies folder. The next morning, over breakfast on their hotel balcony, Alexander surprised her with an unexpected proposal. "I think it's time you moved in with me permanently," he said, casually sipping his coffee. "Not just the apartment I got you, my penthouse. I want you with me, Emily, all the time." Emily fought to keep her expression neutral, to not betray the revulsion and fear that churned inside her. "That's a big step," she managed. "Is it? We've been together for months now. I think we both know where this is headed." He reached across the table, capturing her hand in his. "I need you, Emily. You've become essential to me." The frightening thing was that she could hear the genuine emotion in his voice. In his own twisted way, Alexander did care for her, but his version of love was possessive, controlling, ultimately destructive. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a possession, beautiful, compliant, and completely under his control. "I need time to think about it," she said, squeezing his hand and forcing a smile. "It's not that I don't care about you, Alexander, I need to be sure." His eyes darkened momentarily, the first flash of the temper she knew simmered beneath his controlled exterior. Then, just as quickly, his expression cleared. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Take all the time you need, but not too much time, Emily. I'm not a patient man, as you well know." The remainder of their San Francisco trip passed in a haze of tension masked by pretense. Emily played her part, the devoted girlfriend, occasionally independent, but ultimately enthralled by Alexander's wealth and power. Meanwhile, she carefully observed, gathering information, searching for a way out that wouldn't leave her destroyed. In his wake. Her opportunity came unexpectedly on their last day in California. Alexander received an urgent call that took him away for several hours, leaving Emily alone in their hotel suite with access to his laptop. Moving quickly, she used his passwords to access his private server, downloading financial records, correspondence with government officials, and evidence of his systematic corruption onto a small flash drive she had purchased at the hotel gift shop. When Alexander returned, looking troubled and distracted, Emily was sitting innocently on the balcony, reading a book he had bought her. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Nothing for you to worry about," he replied, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. "Pack your things. We're leaving for Boston tonight instead of tomorrow. Something's come up that requires my immediate attention." As their private jet soared east across the darkening continent, Emily gazed out the window at the lights of cities and towns below. Each one represented lives being lived in freedom, something she now realized she had gradually surrendered during her time with Alexander. But with the flash drive securely hidden in her makeup compact, she felt the first stirrings of hope. She had leverage now, a way out. What she didn't yet know was that Alexander Blackwood was not a man who let go easily of what he considered his. And in his mind, Emily Matthews belonged to him now and forever. Back in Boston, Emily found herself living a double life. To Alexander, she was the same woman he had left San Francisco with, thoughtful, occasionally challenging, but ultimately yielding to his will. She accepted his gifts with feigned gratitude, smiled at his possessive introductions at social events, and pretended to consider his offer to move in together. But behind the facade, Emily was methodically planning her escape. The flash drive. She had hidden contained enough evidence to destroy Alexander Blackwood, but also to potentially put her in danger. She needed to be smart about how she used it, and more importantly, when. 2 weeks after their return from California, Alexander invited Emily to accompany him to his family's estate in Vermont, the same lake house Sophia Reynolds had mentioned. As his sleek car wound through the wooded roads of New England, Emily stared out at the blazing autumn foliage, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "You'll love it here," Alexander said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's the one place I can truly relax. No phones, no meetings, just us." The estate was everything she had expected, a sprawling stone mansion overlooking a pristine lake, surrounded by acres of manicured grounds and dense forest. It spoke of old money, of generational wealth that had shaped the country from the shadows. "My great-grandfather built this place," Alexander explained, as he led her through rooms filled with priceless art and antiques. He understood something fundamental about power, Emily. It's not just about having money, it's about having influence, the ability to shape events without ever appearing to be involved. There was pride in his voice, but also something darker, an echo of the ruthlessness she had glimpsed in his business dealings. For a moment she saw him clearly, not as the charming, troubled man she had fallen for, but as the product of generations of men who viewed the world as their personal chessboard. "And what about love?" Emily asked quietly. Did he understand? "So that too." Alexander's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Love is a luxury, Emily, one that men in my position can rarely afford." "That sounds incredibly lonely," she observed, holding his gaze. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, a momentary vulnerability that made Emily's heart twist despite everything she now knew about him. "It can be," he admitted, "until someone comes along who makes you question everything you thought you knew." He pulled her close then, kissing her with an intensity that bordered on desperation. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to wonder if there was still something salvageable in him, some core of humanity that had survived his upbringing and the corrupting influence of his power. That evening, as they dined on the terrace overlooking the moonlit lake, Alexander appeared more relaxed than she had ever seen him. He spoke of his childhood, of rare happy moments spent sailing on the lake with his mother, before she retreated into the haze of prescription medications that eventually claimed her life. "She was the only person who ever loved me unconditionally," he said softly, swirling the wine in his glass. "After she was gone, my father made sure I understood that love was a weakness, something to be exploited, not experienced." "And you believed him," Emily said. It wasn't a question. Alexander's smile was tinged with sadness. "I became what I needed to be to survive him, and then to surpass him." Later, as Alexander slept beside her in the massive master bedroom, Emily slipped out of bed and began her search. The boathouse Sophia had mentioned, what secrets did it hold? Moving silently through the darkened house, she found a set of keys in Alexander's study and made her way down to the lake. The boathouse was a simple structure, silhouetted against the starlit water. Emily's hands trembled as she tried several keys before finding one that fit the heavy padlock. The door swung open with a creak that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. Inside, the air was musty and still. Emily used the flashlight on her phone to navigate the space, which at first appeared to be nothing more than a typical boathouse, a small powerboat covered in a tarp, fishing equipment, life jackets hanging on hooks. But then she noticed a seam in the wooden wall, too straight to be natural. A hidden door, revealed by pressing on a seemingly solid panel, opened into a small room that made Emily's blood run cold. One wall was covered in photographs and documents, a timeline of Alexander's rise to power, annotated with names that Emily recognized from news headlines, politicians who had mysteriously changed their positions on regulatory issues, journalists whose careers had been destroyed after investigating, Blackwood Enterprises, competitors whose businesses had collapsed following unexpected scandals. But it was the opposite wall that truly horrified her. Photos of women, at least a dozen, with dates and notes beneath them. Some faces she recognized from Alexander's files, but others were new to her. Each had been connected to Alexander, in some way, and each had been dealt with when they became inconvenient or dangerous. They hadn't disappeared, as Sophia had implied. They had been systematically discredited, their lives dismantled piece by piece until they were no longer threats. One had lost custody of her children due to evidence of substance abuse that Emily suspected had been manufactured. Another had been committed to a psychiatric facility after a breakdown that coincided with her threats to expose Alexander's business practices. In the center of this wall of destruction was a photo of Emily herself, taken without her knowledge on the day she and Alexander had first met. Beneath it, in Alexander's precise handwriting, were the words, "Perfect. Acquisition in progress." She had never been a person to him, just another conquest, another piece to be played in his game of power and control. The tender moments, the vulnerability, the declarations of need, all calculated to bind her to him. Emily sank to her knees on the cold floor, overwhelmed by the scope of Alexander's deception and the depth of the danger she now faced. She had to get away, not just from the lake house, but from his life entirely, and she had to do it in a way that wouldn't leave her destroyed like the women on his wall. A noise from outside startled her, footsteps on the dock. Alexander had woken and followed her. "Emily?" His voice carried across the still water. "Are you out here?" Moving quickly, she closed the hidden room, erased all signs of her presence, and slipped out a side door just as Alexander entered through the main entrance. Heart pounding, she circled around to approach from the direction of the house. "There you are," she called, forcing lightness into her voice. "I couldn't sleep and wanted to see the lake at night." Alexander studied her in the moonlight, his expression unreadable. "You should have woken me. It's not safe to wander alone at night." "I'm perfectly safe here," Emily replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Aren't I?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning that only Emily fully understood. After a moment, Alexander smiled and extended his hand. "Of course you are," he said smoothly. "Let's go back to bed." As they walked back to the house, Emily's mind raced. She needed to get back to Boston, to access the evidence she had hidden, to find a way out that wouldn't leave her as just another photo on Alexander's wall of broken women. Her opportunity came the next morning, when Alexander received an urgent call that required his immediate return to Boston. "Some problems can't be handled remotely," he explained, clearly frustrated at the interruption of their weekend. "I need to deal with this personally." "I understand," Emily assured him, hiding her relief. "Business comes first." Alexander studied her for a moment. "You're being unusually accommodating." Emily shrugged, offering a small smile. "I'm learning to accept the reality of being with a man like you. Your work is important." Satisfied with her apparent submission, Alexander arranged for a car to take them back to the city. As they drove, Emily gazed out at the passing landscape, her mind focused on the steps she would need to take once they reached Boston. "I have meetings all afternoon," Alexander informed her as they arrived at his penthouse. "Will you be here when I get back?" Emily nodded, touching his face gently. "Where else would I be?" The moment he was gone, she sprang into action. From her hiding place in a hollowed-out book on her bedside table, a gift from Alexander, ironically, she retrieved the flash drive containing the evidence she had gathered. Then she placed a call to the one person who might understand what she was facing. "This is Sophia Reynolds," a cautious voice answered. It's Emily Matthews. We met in San Francisco. I need your help. There was a long pause. Are you alone? For now. But I don't have much time. Meet me at the Boston Public Library in an hour. The rare book room. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. Emily packed a small bag with essentials, took one last look around the luxurious apartment that had become her gilded cage, and left using the service elevator to avoid being seen by the doorman who reported her comings and goings to Alexander. The Boston Public Library was crowded with tourists and students, providing excellent cover as Emily made her way to the rare book room. Sophia was waiting, looking more severe than she had in San Francisco, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. "You found the boathouse," Sophia said without preamble, noting Emily's haunted expression. Emily nodded, her throat tight. "I saw the wall, the women." "And now you understand what you're dealing with." Sophia's voice was grim. "Alexander doesn't let go of what he considers his. And he definitely considers you his." "I have evidence," Emily said, showing Sophia the flash drive. "Financial records, correspondence with officials, details of his offshore accounts, enough to bring him down." Sophia's eyes widened. "How did you get this?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is how I use it to get away from him, without ending up like those other women." The older woman considered for a moment. "You need leverage, something so powerful that he won't dare come after you. But you also need protection. Alexander has people everywhere. I know someone who can help with that part," Emily said, thinking of her college roommate who now worked for the FBI's white-collar crime division. "But I need to disappear first, just long enough to put everything in place." Sophia nodded slowly. "I have a house in Maine that no one knows about, not even Alexander. You can stay there while you figure out your next move." As they finalized their plans, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Meeting ended early. Coming home now, have dinner plans for us." "He's on his way back to the penthouse," Emily said, panic rising in her throat. "If I'm not there—" "Then you need to be," Sophia said firmly. "Go back. Act normal. Pack what you need when he's not. Looking, and meet me tomorrow at the address I'll text you. Can you hold it together for one more night?" Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've been playing a role for months. What's one more night?" When Alexander returned to the penthouse, he found Emily curled up on the sofa with a book, looking the picture of contentment. If he noticed the slight tension in her smile, or the careful way she responded to his kiss, he gave no indication. "I've been thinking about your offer," Emily said as they ate dinner at the penthouse's terrace. "About moving in permanently." Alexander's eyes sharpened with interest. "And?" "I think you're right. It's time." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "I want to be with you, Alexander, completely." The smile that spread across his face was genuine, perhaps the first truly authentic expression she had seen from him in weeks. "You've made me very happy, Emily. We'll start moving your things tomorrow." "Actually," she said, carefully gauging his reaction, "I need to go to Vermont first, to visit my parents. It's been too long and I want to tell them about us in person." A flicker of suspicion crossed Alexander's features. "I'll come with you." "No," Emily said quickly, then softened her tone. "This is something I need to do alone. They're traditional people, Alexander. I want to prepare them before they meet you. Make sure they understand how important you are to me." He studied her for a long moment, and Emily forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Finally he nodded. "Of course, family is important. Take my car and driver, I insist." "Thank you," Emily said, relief flooding through her. "I'll leave in the morning." That night, as Alexander slept beside her, Emily lay awake, mentally rehearsing. Her plan: she would leave in his car as promised, but only to throw off any surveillance. Once outside the city, she would switch vehicles and meet Sophia, beginning her journey to freedom. As dawn broke over Boston, Emily kissed a still sleeping Alexander goodbye, whispering, "I'll see you soon." It was the first direct lie she had told him, and it tasted like ashes in her mouth. The escape went exactly as planned. Miles outside the city, Emily had the driver stop at a roadside diner, claiming she needed to use the restroom. Instead, she slipped out the back and into Sophia's waiting car. By midday, they had reached the isolated cabin in coastal Maine, where Emily would hide while setting her plan in motion. It took Alexander less than 6 hours to realize she had fled. Her phone, which she had left in the glove compartment of his car with GPS tracking enabled, began to light up with messages and calls. The driver, upon reaching Burlington without her, had called Alexander in a panic. "He'll be furious," Sophia warned as they monitored the situation from afar. "And he'll use every resource at his disposal to find you." "Let him try," Emily said with more confidence than she felt. "I have something he wants more than he wants me." Over the next 3 days, Emily worked methodically. First, she contacted her college roommate at the FBI, sending carefully selected pieces of evidence that pointed to Alexander's web of corruption without revealing her own location. Then, through an anonymous email account, she reached out to a respected investigative journalist who had been trying to expose Blackwood Enterprises for years. Finally, and most crucially, she prepared a comprehensive file that detailed everything she had discovered, every bribe, every threat, every ruined life, along with a personal account of her relationship with Alexander. This file, along with all the evidence she had gathered, was uploaded to a secure server with instructions for its release if anything happened to her. On the 4th day, Emily sent Alexander a message from a burner phone. "We need to talk. Alone." His response was immediate. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe, and I'll stay that way as long as you listen to what I have to say." They arranged to meet at a public park in Portland, Maine, neutral ground where neither would have the advantage. Emily arrived early, positioning herself on a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. When Alexander appeared, walking purposefully along the path toward her, she felt a familiar flutter in her chest, despite everything she now knew about him. He looked tired, his usual impeccable appearance slightly frayed at the edges. "Emily," he said as he sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. Come home." "This isn't a game, Alexander," Emily replied calmly. "And I'm not coming back." His expression darkened. "Do you have any idea what you're doing, the risks you're taking?" "I know exactly what I'm doing. I've seen the boathouse. I know about the women, about Senator Harrison, about all of it." Alexander went very still, his eyes never leaving her face. "You don't understand what you've gotten yourself involved in." "I understand perfectly," Emily said, holding his gaze. "You collect people, Alexander. You use them. And when they're no longer useful, you destroy them. But you won't destroy me." "I would never hurt you," he insisted, reaching for her hand. Emily pulled away. "Not physically, maybe, but you've been systematically dismantling my independence since the day we met. Every gift, every opportunity, every decision you made. For me, it was all designed to make me dependent on you, to own me." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I wanted to take care of you, to give you the life you deserve." "No," Emily said firmly. "You wanted to possess me. There's a difference." For a moment, something like genuine pain flashed across Alexander's face. "I love you, Emily. You love the idea of me, the perfect acquisition. But you don't know what real love is, Alexander. It's not about control or possession. It's about freedom, respect, equality." "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice cold. "Money, a settlement. Name your price." Emily smiled sadly. "I don't want your money. I want my life back. And I want your guarantee that you'll leave me alone, permanently." "Or what?" "Or everything I've discovered about you goes public. The offshore accounts, the bribes, the market manipulation, everything." Alexander's laugh was without humor. "You really think you can threaten me? Do you have any idea who I am, what I'm capable of?" "I know exactly what you're capable of," Emily said evenly. "That's why I've taken precautions. Everything I have is set to be released automatically if anything happens to me. The FBI already has enough to open an investigation. A journalist is standing by to publish the full story. You can't stop it, Alexander, not this time." The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of her preparations. "You've been planning this all along." "No," Emily said softly. "I genuinely cared for you. I wanted to believe you could change. But some darkness runs too deep, Alexander. Your father taught you that love is weakness, and you've spent your life proving him right." They sat in silence for several minutes, the autumn breeze rustling the leaves around them. Finally, Alexander spoke. "What are your terms?" "You leave me alone, completely. No surveillance, no contact, no attempts to interfere in my life. In return, I keep what I know to myself. And my reputation, my business?" Emily shrugged. "That depends on you. Continue your operations as they are, and eventually someone else will expose you. Change your methods. Become the legitimate businessman. You pretend to be, and perhaps you can salvage something worthwhile." Alexander studied her with a mixture of anger and reluctant respect. "You've thought of everything." "I learned from the best," Emily replied without irony. He stood abruptly, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. "You'll never find anyone who loves you the way I do, Emily. No one who can give you what I can." Emily rose to face him, meeting his gaze steadily. "That's the point, Alexander. I don't want what you offer. Not anymore. I want something real, something authentic, something that doesn't cost me my soul." For a brief moment, something like regret flickered across Alexander's face. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and walked away, his shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. Emily watched him go, feeling not triumph but a profound sadness for all that might have been if Alexander had understood what love truly meant. In the months that followed, Emily rebuilt her life piece by piece. She returned to Boston, but took a different position at a smaller publishing house, focusing on stories of resilience and redemption. She reconnected with her parents, finally understanding the true value of the loving relationship they had modeled for her all her life. Alexander kept his distance, though Emily occasionally glimpsed his name in financial news, his company divesting from certain ventures, new charitable initiatives being launched, a corporate restructuring that industry analysts praised for its transparency. Whether these changes were genuine or merely cosmetic, Emily couldn't know. But she hoped, perhaps naively, that their confrontation had planted a seed of change in him. On a crisp spring day, almost a year after she had walked away from Alexander Blackwood, Emily sat in a coffee shop near the Boston Common, editing a manuscript about a woman who had escaped an abusive relationship and found her voice as an advocate for others. The parallels to her own journey were not lost on her. "Is this seat taken?" a male voice asked. Emily looked up to find a man about her age standing beside her table, handsome in an understated way, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Nothing like Alexander's commanding presence, but somehow all the more appealing for it. "It's all yours," she replied, returning his smile. As they fell into conversation, about books, about Boston, about the simple pleasures of a perfect spring, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the uncomplicated joy of connecting with another person without agenda or manipulation. Just two people getting to know each other, one genuine moment at a time. When he eventually asked for her number, Emily hesitated only briefly before offering it. She was ready to trust again, not blindly as she once had, but with eyes wide open. Ready to seek a love built not on power and possession, but on mutual respect and genuine care. As she walked home that evening, Emily thought about the woman she had become, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been fooled, more compassionate for having glimpsed the wounded child beneath Alexander's ruthless exterior. The experience had taught her that true love was not about surrendering your power, but about finding someone who never asked you to. In the end, Emily Matthews hadn't just escaped Alexander Blackwood's gilded cage. She had found something far more precious, the courage to stand alone, the wisdom to know her worth, and the faith that somewhere, with someone, she would find a love that asked for nothing in return but her authentic self. And that, she now understood, was worth more than all the wealth and power in the world. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Emily's journey from captivity to freedom has moved you as deeply as it has moved us. The path to authentic love is rarely straight, often challenging but always worth pursuing. For more emotionally resonant stories like this one, check out our special playlist by clicking on the link to your left. If you've enjoyed this tale of self-discovery and empowerment, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the strength of the human